Good afternoon, everybody. Yep, welcome to another episode of Disability Landscape. I'm here today with my special guest host, and that is Tricia Carlberg. Tricia, you have a great guest on the national stage, sort of. Introduce our friend here today from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, today we have Donna Meltzer with us, and she's from the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities. This council receives federal funding to support programs that promote self-determination, integration, and inclusion for all people in the United States with developmental disabilities. So it's great to have you, Donna.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Trish.
Yeah. So Donna, can you tell us a little bit about your organization and how it got started?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. In fact, our national organization recently celebrated a big anniversary. We're just a little bit over 50 years old. We look great for our age, we think. But we were founded soon after 1970 because our members are the nation's 56 state and territorial councils on developmental disabilities. And they were established by federal statute, by congressional law in 1970. So we've been around for a long time. We're located in Washington, D.C., and the reason for that is because our national staff, we do advocacy work. We advocate for laws that will help people who live with intellectual and developmental and really all disabilities. And so we like to be close to Capitol Hill and to the White House, and to really have that national presence for all of our 56 members.
Yeah, that is so great that you can get so many people involved. Can you talk to us a little bit about advocacy and what are some things that we've done for people there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we advocate for a number of different things. Our goal, of course, is to help people who have lived experiences, people with disabilities, to have the best life possible, to have the life that they choose. So, when we think about what do we want in our lives, I think what we all want is a nice home to grow up in, a family to be with, to have friends, to have the ability to have a good education, hopefully someday to have a job, to grow up, to choose our own family and, who we want to spend time with. So we advocate for all of the laws that make those things possible. To basically, we're looking at people's civil rights, right? To have a good education, to be able to go to school and not be discriminated against because of your disability. So we're always looking for additional funding and laws that will protect those rights, whether that's the right to a free and appropriate public education under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or it might be to ensure that we have good jobs, that people with disabilities have, honestly, not just a job, but a chance to have a career. The same way you or I might want to have not just a job doing whatever's available, but to really, be able to have a lifelong career that we enjoy and a body of work that we can keep growing in. So, we work with the federal government, with all, places like the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services. We fight for health care for everybody who needs health care. So we work with Capitol Hill, we work with the federal agencies to make sure that all of these laws are in place. If there are laws that are missing, we want to advocate for new things that help lives to be better. We look to protect all of these civil rights issues for people with disabilities.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that a lot, Donna. I also have a healthcare position. And so even in Minnesota, we often fight by going to the Capitol and fighting for healthcare workers and their paid salary and things like that, and how important it is, that we're paid fair wages and things like that. So we can give, as much support back to people with developmental disabilities and just, really help them in their lives. So,
absolutely.
Exactly.
I'm glad to hear that you do that at the state level. Our DD councils, and of course we have one in Minnesota, because we have one in every state and territory of the United States, but our states are also active at the state level. So they advocate in the state house. Our council, which is a body of individuals who primarily are people with disabilities, they're appointed by the governor. And so they really advise the governor and the state legislature, state by state by state, on what's important for people with disabilities in order to live their best life in the community. So they will go to the state legislature, they'll work with the governor to tell them what's working and what's not working. And our job really is to innovate, right? To look at where there are gaps in systems. And when I say systems, I mean things like the transportation system, the education system, the housing or healthcare, all of those big things that provide opportunities. And so the council's job is to look at where systems either aren't working well or might not exist at all, or where change is needed. And they look to really create solutions for problems that exist. So if a state sees that there's just not enough good jobs for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, they're going to focus a lot of their work around the employment system and working with potential employers and working with the governor's office to maybe create a better plan for the state for increasing the number of jobs available for people with disabilities. If transportation is a problem in a particular area, the council might work with, the Department of Transportation, but also like Uber and Lyft and other transportation companies to find better ways to help people get where they need to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like that too, Donna, because I also drive for rideshare, and we often get clients who are, given a contract through rideshare programs so that they can get to work better, especially because rideshare is becoming such a big thing in, especially in Minnesota. It's almost, diminishing the bus system, it's almost taking over that area. So it is so important that those systems are put in place.
Yep, absolutely.
And Donna, can you tell us a little bit about any events that are coming up?
So, as a national organization, our events typically tend to be, conferences that we run, of course, with, being in pandemic life, everything looks a little bit different right now. So, our next big event will be our annual conference, which always happens in the summertime. And we're a little bit behind the 8 ball because we won't have our gathering in person the way we would hope to. So we are still planning out our national event for late summer or early fall. So we're a little bit behind on that. But I think what your listeners might want to know is that every state has their own DD council. So we're the national entity that everybody belongs to, but the states have their own events. And so I would recommend that if your listeners are looking for a way to get involved with one of our state councils or find out what events they have in your listeners' local area, that they go to the website for their local council. If they, you can Google it and say, Minnesota DD Council, and you'll get that information. But you're also welcome to come to our national website, www.nacdd.org. And we do have a listing there of all of our councils and how to contact them directly. So that's a good way to find out what's happening in your local area.
I'm sure there's a lot of virtual things going on with that too, maybe even in Maryland.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been really busy even during the pandemic. A lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in particular have struggled this year because, if it's not safe to be out in the community, you need to stay at home, especially if you're not comfortable wearing a mask, or maybe, we do know a lot of people with IDD lost their jobs or were sent home, but a lot of them do jobs that can't be done from home. A lot of them are front-facing jobs, a lot in retail or in healthcare areas. And so people are at home. So yeah, they're looking for ways to connect. And we do that a lot through Zoom and through videos and, self-advocacy meetings and events. So a lot of our councils do have a lot of exciting things that are going on for people to join in. I will say we have a national gathering of self-advocates monthly. The third Thursday of every month, we do a Zoom meeting, and all are welcome. You just need to let us know by reaching our phone line or email info@nacdd.org if you'd like a link to join us. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities come together on the third Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and we always have a topic of the month. Yes, Eastern time. We have a topic that we discuss each month, and it's just a great way for people to get resources, meet one another, connect with other people, share some of their concerns, and we learn a lot from the people who come on the call about how they're doing during this pandemic. Are they struggling with isolation? Are they concerned about losing a job? Are they worried about vaccine and what it means to get the vaccine? So we talk a lot about really, really deep topics on our calls, but all are welcome, and we'd love to have people join in.
That does sound like a great opportunity to get to the heart of people, to kind of get their feedback and just know how people are doing. And in these times, that's can be as great a lifeline for people as anything else, just being there with others.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We believe in that very much. I know some of our state councils, just do check-ins regularly with people so that nobody feels too lonely. You can see each other on a Zoom. Sometimes it's like an exercise class, or everybody bring your lunch and let's have a discussion while we all eat our lunch together. Just those small things, which may sound small in the big picture, but it can really be life affirming and life changing for people who are really experiencing that isolation.
Well, certainly. See, I'd like to touch, if I could, on some of the programs you run that you operate for, your different chapters and such. I was looking, you have one entitled the Civic Engagement Initiative. How does that, I know during the pandemic, I think that actually makes it a little more difficult. So is that still something that they're striving for?
Well, civic engagement is certainly something that's really important, right? We believe that people with disabilities should become engaged in their communities. We all feel like we want to belong somewhere. So civic engagement is sort of a big, broad term that can mean a lot of things. What different ways do we engage in our community, right? So for some people, being engaged civically might mean participating in, say, something like a Martin Luther King Day event where people come together maybe to paint buildings or clean up neighborhoods or parks or whatnot. We certainly encourage people to get engaged in community-wide activities. You're right to say that this year, a lot of those did not happen for obvious reasons. So there was maybe, unfortunately, a little bit of a hiatus. But I'll tell you what did happen in a huge way this year that is very much civic engagement, and that is voting.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
We just had a major election in November. And our national organization worked very hard on a big campaign to encourage more people with disabilities to get out and vote in whatever way was most feasible. So for some people, that might have meant in person. For many, that meant voting by mail or filling out a form and dropping it at a drop box. But we encourage people to vote in whatever way worked best for them. We call it our One Vote Now engagement. It's One Vote Now, onevotenow.org. But we really used that platform this year to help educate more people with disabilities about their right to vote, the importance of voting. The one thing we will never do is tell people how to vote or who to vote for. That's unethical. We don't do that. But what we do is make sure that everybody knows when and where and how to vote. And so we provide a lot of resources, and we really did everything that we could as a national organization and in conjunction with our state councils to get out the vote. It's really important, we believe, you know, the voting block for people with disabilities has been steadily growing. And what we wanted people to know, especially this year, was that despite the pandemic, voting was critically important and that people needed to speak their minds. So we did engage throughout the whole summer and through the post-election to encourage people with disabilities to get out the vote. We saw that happening. We encouraged more people to register to vote. And, you know, we saw a lot of uptick this year in the numbers of people who were registering, who were voting. And we've been watching over the last couple of election cycles to see how people with disability trend and what makes them feel motivated to vote. What are some of those issues? Not people, but issues. So for example, a few years back, Medicaid was very much on the chopping block by Congress. They were looking to cut funding by $800 billion back in 2017. So between the election of 2016 and the midterm election of 2018, we saw a lot of people with disabilities change how they voted because so many people with disabilities rely on Medicaid for their waivers, for their ability to live in the community and live that life that they choose. And so we saw people really voting in 2018 based on how their members of Congress voted on in the previous election or you know, how they were planning to vote in that election around the Medicaid issue. People with disabilities tend to vote for members of Congress who believe that everybody deserves health care. So, you know, we just share the issues, let people make their own decisions because that's what's most important. But what we really focused in on was getting more people with disabilities to vote. So that's civic engagement.
And I do see for your website policies that healthcare is a big part of what you do and help assist people in knowing how important it is and keep it going.
Yes, that's right. Look, we all depend on being healthy. This year more than ever, we've been worried about our health and our well-being. People with disabilities are no different in that regard from able-bodied people. And so, you know, we definitely believe that people need access to good health care. This year, we will also be advocating, we already are advocating for continuation of being able to participate in telehealth, even beyond the pandemic, right? Because we've all learned not just how important it is during a pandemic to be able to reach your healthcare providers, but always. And, you know, we did a great conversation. I mentioned those monthly calls that we do with people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we asked on our last call, we asked the question about, what do you think about telehealth? Is it helpful for you? And do you want to see it continue? And everybody said yes, that, you know, while we all understand that you can't do all kinds of medicine over the phone or Zoom, right? You can't get blood that way, lab work, you know, sometimes you need that doctor to be hands-on. But a lot of people, particularly with disabilities, who felt that it's where transportation is an issue, getting to a doctor's office can be a long journey. To be able to have more frequent conversations with their doctors and solve, I'll call it small problems, not always small, but you know, to be able to solve problems in the moment through a conversation over Zoom or whatever the platform is, has been enormously helpful. And the doctors agree. They're like, we have more eyes on people. we can see how they're doing. And then we can advise that if they really need to come in and see us, or maybe they need to see somebody immediately, in an emergency setting, and then we know where we can send that person to an emergency room if they really need care. Let's say they, show a wound over the video, they say, oh no, you got to go to the local health center. So let's get you an appointment there right away.
Right.
So
yeah,
we will.
And telehealth is great because so often in, my case, a lot of people's cases, you're going into an office for just a routine checkup. You're there 5 minutes, but it might take you an hour to get there.
That's right. That's right. So a lot of people appreciate, look, we all appreciate it, right? Same for me. I've been able to have appointments with my own doctor and not have to get in the car and drive and then pay for the parking and then drive home and lose 2 hours of work. Instead, 15 minutes on a Zoom and I'm done.
Yep.
It's been great. It's been great. So we will be advocating with CMS, the Centers for Medicaid Services, which is the federal agency that oversees all of those great waiver programs that a lot of people with IDD are on. That's what helps them to live in the community.
Okay.
And if those waivers can include access to technology so that people can connect using a phone or a tablet or a computer, we think that that's a real win. So we will be advocating for that. We'll be advocating, just to continue for all people access to telemedicine, especially for mental health care as well. And I'm hearing right now from a lot of mental health providers that they will be continuing after the pandemic to meet with clients either over the phone or through, something like Zoom or other similar platforms, because again, it's not fair that only people who have access to travel and transportation can get to these appointments.
I agree completely. Real quickly, I was curious about the CloseUp Foundation. This is a partnership you have with them?
It was. It's kind of fallen apart because of COVID world. I have to reestablish it, perhaps when the world gets back together. But are you familiar with the CloseUp program? Do you know what it is?
I am slightly familiar. If you would kind of fill us in, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd love to, because it's a project I was really excited about and really do hope that we can pick back up after the pandemic. CloseUp is a program for high school students. In some areas, they include middle school as well. It's for students who are interested in learning more about how government works. So, if you guys remember, maybe back when you were in high school, you had student government. And a lot of those kids, were really excited about learning things about, how a bill becomes a law and all of the great things that, largely go on in Washington, D.C., but have an impact on our whole country. So CloseUp is a program where highly motivated students who are interested in how government works can come to Washington, D.C. for I think it's like a 4 to 5 day program. They usually come with a group from their school, or sometimes it's a couple of schools together that come. And they spend the week touring DC. They go to Congress and they go to some of the federal agencies and they go to the White House and they meet with a whole lot of people to learn about government. So CloseUp Foundation had reached out to me a couple of years back saying, we'd really love to include more students who have intellectual and developmental disabilities in our programs. We want to be very inclusive. Can we work with you, because you guys have these councils in every state and territory? Maybe we can build out some better opportunities to make sure that students with disabilities are fully included. And so we really did some great work on that. So that was one part of it. We got a lot more students with disabilities to be included and come on those programs to Washington. And then the other part is that, and the program typically runs, CloseUp runs their programs usually between the spring and the fall. So typically about 4 or 5 times during their season, I'll call it, I would go and speak to all of the students on the group. So there's usually about 150 students in a group, and I would go and I would meet with them and talk to them about laws like the Developmental Disabilities Act, which is the legislation that established our DD councils. I talked to them about people with disabilities. I talked to them about inclusion, that it really starts at home. You know, I encourage young people to start thinking about their own communities. Usually their first real community is their school, right?
Sure.
Or maybe it's sports or Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, other things that they're included in or that they engage in. And I talk to them about what does it mean to include students who might not look just like you, and to think about what does that take? How do you really build inclusive communities? And so I get them thinking about their own lives and what they can do, because at some point they're going to be grown-ups running businesses and being teachers and maybe even being policymakers, and, you know, working in communities where they want to be people who will be including people with disabilities in all aspects of their community life. So I work with them when they're in town for their programs, and it's something I personally have a passion to do. I think educating young leaders as they, you know, start to grow their careers, a lot of them I see when they're juniors or seniors in high school, and I talk with them about what they're going to experience in college and how they can really change our country for the better, how they can pay attention to people's rights and full inclusion, not just of, you know, race and gender and, you know, all of the other intersectionalities that we're focused on as a country right now, but to really include people with disabilities and to look at how they fit into the scheme of their lives.
Okay. So unfortunately, we are out of time. But Donna, I appreciate the conversation. You've given us a lot of great information. We thank you so much for your time today, Donna. I want to thank my co-host, Tricia Carlson, and Donna Meltzer for being here today. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.